Hello and welcome back to our third episode of Jelim's Storytime. For those who don't know me, my name is Jess, better known by the author moniker Jelim, and I'm the author of the Monster Inside Chronicles, the first vampire series. Today, unlike the last couple of story times that I've been sending out that were quite nostalgic for me, I am taking inspiration from the latest author Q&A that I have done and giving you a glimpse at one of the future series of the Monster Inside Chronicles. So I talked about the dragon storyline for The Sin of Greed, the series called The Lost Isle. That series, I have not written very much of it, but I have written an initial chapter or so to introduce the first initial character and perhaps some of his ambitions. So I'm going to read that out to you today and hopefully you enjoy it. So let's go! The skies above Avoria were always overcast, always filled with the ever-shifting grey shades of clouds. A light grey, nearly white colour on the best of days, a dark grey, nearly black colour on the worst. For a solid week now, it had been a grey the shade of Ezran's mother's best silverware. Not dark, but not the brightest of days either. Still, his mother said it was a good sign, that the elders were looking down on them favourably. Ezran had always been sceptical when the day of the choosing came. He'd seen plenty of his old friends taken in the years before, so much so that he was the only one left now. Ezran knew why, despite how his mother tried to hide it from him. Ezran, unlike every other inhabitant of Avoria, was not a pure-blood dragonkin. His father had been a lost merchant who had washed ashore long ago after his ship had been caught in the border storms. Such a thing was not uncommon. Avoria was well protected by the Elder's wrath, but survivors from outside weren't. Ezran's mother, the beautiful healer Talia, had found him and brought him to the isolated herbal fields where she'd lived. There she had nursed him back to health and taught him of where he was, of the dragonkin and their homeland Avoria. But outsiders were not permitted for a reason. When Wilderon, the dragon lord, had heard of the stranger on the edge of his domain, he had descended with his great talons and burning flames. The stranger hadn't stood a chance. Talia, for her indiscretion and failure to report to Wilderon, had been marked by the dragon's talons across her cheek and forbidden to heal it through her arts. Her scarred face was a reminder to all who looked upon her, as was Ezran, the product of a dragonkin and a stranger from another land. Always small and scrawny for his age, and with only one of the canine-like dragonkin birthmarks that typically appeared below their eyes. Most avoided them like they were diseased, like their impurities could be caught from interacting with them. Still, despite the might of Wilderon's punishment, Ezran refused to take it lying down. He'd made friends, even if it had been hard at first, but Ezran's inherent will to make something his own was not something to be scoffed at. A dragonkin trait, Talia had remarked on one occasion when she'd found Ezran's box of hidden treasures. If you are chosen, you will make a fine dragon one day. Because that was the very purpose of a dragonkin. Only the worthy were chosen to train for the honour of unlocking their bloodlines and joining their ranks. The ranks of the dragon lords, those who had protected their people and defended their lands for generations with their true forms. Only they were capable of rising above the clouds and glimpsing the sun, skies, oceans and lands beyond Avoria, though few ever left for long. Now there was only one dragon lord who remained in Avoria, Wilderon Nightscale. He had been their lord for 2 centuries, perhaps longer, but no one alive was entirely sure. Becoming a dragon lord and all the power that came with it extended one's lifespan exponentially. Wilderon may live a few more millennia, and no one would worry for the future of Avoria should dragon lord remain. But there had been whispers, rumours, things that were speculated in the shadows and out of sight. If Wilderon had been the last dragon lord to come into being, then it had been quite some time since a new dragon lord had been born, If the tales were to be believed, Dragon Lords were born at least once a decade. Perhaps it skipped a generation on occasion. After all, the Dragon Lords were quite powerful, and to become one was not an easy task. But never in the histories that could be remembered had such a span of time passed where none were born, or where so many had left or passed on. The Dragonkin were becoming restless. Had the potential in their bloodlines fallen short? But their elders, the souls of those Dragon Lords who had passed on, they kept the barrier around Evoria present. Surely that meant they were not abandoned. Despite how Wilderon would assure them, nothing seemed to kill the rumours entirely. Nothing would except for a new Dragon Lord. But the first step was being chosen, and today was Ezran's final chance. The chosen had to be taken before they turned 13, and Ezran was growing far too close to that time. In each year previous, he had watched his hard-fought 4 friends be taken in by the Dragon Lord, but each year Wilderon and his guard never so much as glanced at Ezran. They barely even glimpsed at the herbal fields he and his mother called home. Most children were taken in these days, with a rare few exceptions who showed no particular dragon traits. From the age they were taken in to when they turned 18, they would train in the House of Dragons. If they did not become Dragon Lords by then, they would be allowed to return to their homes and forge their own paths on the island. Some were offered positions at the House of Dragons, but they were few in number. Ezran woke before the dawn and hurriedly scrambled from beneath his sheets, tripping over himself to get to his mother in the bedroom next door. "Mother?" Ezran asked carefully as he climbed up onto the bed beside her, barely able to contain his excitement as he leaned towards her. "Mother, it's time." Talia rolled over lazily, her gaze dancing with hope and amusement at her son. "Is it? I do not think the birds have crowed for dawn yet." Ezran frowned, moving back to sit back on his heels as his mother closed her eyes once more. Ezran turned away and was silent for a moment before he mimicked the morning bird call. He turned back to his mother hurriedly. "Did you hear that? I'm sure it must be time now." Talia chuckled, not opening her eyes. "Oh? No, I don't think I did hear it. Let me listen." Ezran fell silent as he waited on bated breath, turning away slightly. Talia opened an eye in time to witness her son whistle the morning call once more. Talia gave a decisive thwack on the back of her son's head before he turned to her with a guilty smile. "Come on then, there is no way either of us will sleep with your energy." Ezran grinned and bounced out of bed. "Go and wash up," Talia called after him. "You want to be presentable to the Lord." Of course he would. He'd never present himself with anything less than his best before the Lord. Ezran pulled out his best clothes, crisp and clean from his mother's iron. He went outside and started the fire beneath the bath, heating the water. He prepared the soaps and scents. When the water was warm enough, he stripped off his old clothes and scrubbed every part of himself, the creamy white skin of his small chest and torso, his stick-like arms and legs, and his face dotted with that curved, pointed birthmark beneath his right eye that marked him as Dragonkin. It was a darker shade of his own skin, and began wide enough at the top to span the bottom of his eye socket before the shape curved in towards the base of his nose. Not having the marks under both eyes like all Dragonkin, his singular mark had only led to further isolation for him and his mother. It used to bother him, being different. Perhaps on occasion it still did, but Ezran had learned patience if nothing else. All he wanted would come to be in his possession eventually. It was just with this, with being chosen, he could not afford to wait any longer. Once thoroughly washed, his golden hair turned to a light brown as it dripped. Ezran climbed out and dried himself off. He was careful not to ruin his hard-earned cleanliness as he carefully dressed in his best clothes, then went to present himself before his mother, who had breakfast ready. By now the sun had risen, and the choosing would begin soon. Every child below the age of 13 would be brought out and presented on the main street of the town. They would line the sides of the street and wait for the Dragon Lord's sedan chair to pass by. The Dragon Lord would determine by those presented who would be chosen and who wouldn't. Those chosen would join the procession. The others would return home. Once they'd eaten, his mother dressed in her nicest clothes, a veil placed over her face to hide the scar that ran from above her left eye down over the bridge of her nose to her right jawline. Ezran didn't like that his mother had to wear the veil. He thought that even with the scar, she was beautiful, with her long, straight black hair and her soft gaze, her skin unblemished but for her dragonkin marks and the scar given to her as a punishment. But it seemed the scar was enough for everyone to turn their backs on her except when they needed her. Her healing skills were second to none on the island. They walked down the long path out of the fields to the main road. There they stood at the crossroads, waiting for the Dragon Lord to pass by. And they waited, and waited, and waited. Though not visible through the dense cloud cover, Ezran could tell when the sun peaked in the sky and began to fall. "It's been hours," he spoke softly. "He has a lot of places to venture today, Ezran. It is not an easy journey to traverse all of Avoria in a single day," said Talia, her voice clear and reassuring. Ezran squared his shoulders and gave a nod. Of course, he thought, he was not the only child to be chosen today. So they continued to wait. They waited until the early evening when finally the procession could be seen coming their way from a distance. This was it, the moment he had waited for all this time. His chance to enter the House of Dragons and become a Dragon Lord. Ezran straightened his clothes and made sure his golden locks were placed neatly, not like he'd been standing in the wind all day. His mother helped a little, then stepped back to stand behind him, a hand on his shoulder to reassure him she was still there. He could make out the flag bearer and the guardians at the front now, and there, alongside the sedan chair, was Divanya, the Dragon Lord's closest aide. There had to be at least 40 children behind them, all looking proud and strong despite the fact that some of them would have marched for hours. The sedan chair was gold in colour, a square base about the size of a large bed. It was carried by 12 servants, 2 on each side and 4 at the front and back. After carrying the chair for the whole day, they still appeared remarkably strong and put together. The base had a column on each of its 4 corners holding up an elaborate roof that was decorated with a carving of the Dragon Lord's true form on top. The great dragon, with its scales dark as night and its massive wings spread wide, its maw wide with a fearsome roar. It looked like it could breathe fire any second. Ezran's heart raced as the chair approached, its highly esteemed occupant like a silent statue beyond the wispy white curtains that kept him out of sight. He faced his eyes forward, not wishing to disrespect the Lord as he passed, but refusing to bow his head completely. A dragon trait, his mother had told him once. Dragons are their own being. They bow to nobody, not even other dragons. The sedan chair was within meters of them when Ezran could not help but hold his breath in anticipation. He waited for the Dragon Lord to point his finger or command him to join the line, to do something, anything. But silence greeted him as his eyes tracked the sedan chair passing by. The curtain lifted in a light burst of wind, and Ezran caught the expression on the Dragon Lord's face. Not honourable, not fierce, as all the stories had suggested. Ezran saw only unbridled discontent and disgust. The chair passed, as did Divanya, with her head held high and proud. Then the guard, then the chosen, some many years younger than him. Very few glanced his way, and when they did, they looked away quickly, some with the same disgust as the Lord, others with amusement at his no doubt shocked and crestfallen expression. "This isn't right," Ezran stated in a hushed tone. "I'm supposed to be there." He went to take a step after the chair so that he could demand an explanation, but his mother stopped him, holding him still. "No, Ezran," she hissed quietly. "Provoking the Lord will not allow you to obtain the outcome you desire. It will only be met with punishment." Ezran's fist closed in anger as he acknowledged his mother's words, and knew there was nothing he could do. He would not be chosen. He would turn 13 at the end of the spring in just 2 months, and be destined to lead a life of normality, forever holding the lowest position in Avarian society. Those who had never set foot in the House of Dragons. This was not what he wanted. It was not how it was supposed to be, and Ezran's patience had just run out. Well, that was a look at our main character, Ezranus, from the Greed storyline in the Monster Inside Chronicles. I hope you enjoyed it. I know that I am very excited to write Ezran's journey in the future and how he will contribute to both his path of chaos and the world as a whole. If you would like to make any requests for future storylines, please do so either in the comments below or on any of my socials with the hashtag Storytime, and I will do my best to have a look through all of them and cater to them as best I can. So, thank you all for joining me today, and I hope you are all doing well and continue to do well. See you next time. Bye.